Welcome to today's deep dive. Imagine for a second that you could take a psychological x-ray of your own exhaustion.
Oh, that's a scary thought.
Right. If you could somehow scan that deep, invisible weariness you feel at the end of a long work week, what do you think the image would actually reveal?
Probably a lot of stress fractures.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
When we think about modern burnout, the pictures that usually come to mind are, pretty quiet. It's the glowing blue light of a laptop at 2 in the morning.
Right.
Or it's that fourth cup of coffee on a Tuesday, staring blankly at a spreadsheet while your heart rate just quietly spikes.
Yeah, the very silent panic.
But today, we are exploring a source document that completely shatters that quiet image. We're digging into this fascinating analysis of an ancient text, an excerpt simply titled Hosea 7:14.pdf. And the mission of this document is to bridge these thousands of years old religious rituals with the very real, very modern hustle culture that you experience every single day.
Yeah, and it's an incredibly ambitious connection. Our goal here is to take the historical and religious context of these ancient practices and basically lay them directly over our contemporary psychological reality.
Right.
We really want to synthesize these two seemingly unrelated worlds to show why a text from the ancient Middle East might actually hold the most accurate, piercing diagnosis for your modern anxiety.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to get there, we have to start with a deeply jarring juxtaposition.
It really is.
I mean, how does physically slashing yourself with swords in an ancient temple have literally anything to do with your crowded daily calendar and your relentless networking?
It sounds like a huge leap.
It does. But the author doesn't start in ancient Israel to answer this. They actually ground us in modern-day Taiwan. They describe a scene in a temple court during these specific religious festivals.
Right, the spirit mediums.
Yes, you have a spirit medium dancing, and as part of the ritual, they are literally cutting into their own body with a sword. It's an intense, bloody practice that is still happening right now in the 21st century.
Wow. And, the psychology behind that visceral action is what we really need to focus on here.
Okay.
Because according to the tradition, those acts aren't just random self-harm. They are these highly calculated performances.
Meant to do what, exactly?
They're meant to prevent bad luck, drive away evil spirits, and basically bring protection, prosperity, and health to the community.
So it's very transactional.
Exactly. The people participating in or sponsoring these rituals are effectively bleeding to secure a good future. They're trying to force the universe's hand through their own physical pain.
And that desperation to control the future is exactly what the author zeroes in on in the central scripture of this deep dive. It's Hosea 7.14. The ancient text reads, "They slash themselves for grain and new wine." And when I first read that, my mind immediately went to extreme sports superstition.
The playoff beards and all that.
Yeah, exactly. You see a fan sitting in the freezing snow without a shirt on, or a player who refuses to wash their gear during a playoff run.
Which is just gross.
It is. But people voluntarily undergo this intense physical discomfort or these totally irrational routines because they think it's going to somehow magically secure a win. You do painful things to control an uncontrollable outcome.
Right, but what's fascinating here is that sports superstitions are usually just about a game.
True.
Grain and new wine, in the context of an ancient agricultural society, those were the ultimate symbols of survival.
It wasn't just a trophy.
No, not at all.
Right.
They represented material abundance and earthly satisfaction.
Yeah.
If you had grain and wine, your family wouldn't starve through the winter.
You actually had a future.
Right. So the terror of the unknown, the fear of a drought, a famine, or pestilence that drove this incredibly intense psychological need for a guarantee.
The stakes were literally life and death, which honestly makes the desire for a guarantee completely understandable.
Oh, totally.
But historically, Israel had a covenant with a God who had consistently sustained them. Yet they look around, they see the neighboring Canaanite cultures engaging in these intense, highly visible, bloody rituals to appease their agricultural gods.
And they decide to mimic them.
Exactly. They adopt these pagan practices.
Yeah, and if we connect this to the bigger picture, it's a profound shift in human behavior. Trusting an invisible God requires a posture of humble dependence.
Which is not easy.
It's not. It forces you to admit that you are not ultimately in control. And that is a terrifyingly vulnerable place for the human psyche to sit.
For sure.
The neighboring rituals, as horrific as they seem to us today, offered this intoxicating illusion of control. They provided a formula.
Like if I put in X, I get Y.
Exactly. If you pay a physical price, if you bleed, the universe just has to pay you back with rain and crops.
Right.
The document emphasizes that this desire for mechanical lever to pull was so strong that Israel completely lost the ability to distinguish between holy worship and pagan imitation.
Yeah.
They wanted a transaction, not a relationship.
I think anyone listening can relate to that on a base level. I mean, we love a formula. We love an if-then statement.
Oh, absolutely.
If I put in the hours, then I get the promotion. If I invest correctly, then I am safe. But I want to play devil's advocate and push back on this a little bit.
Go for it.
Seeking provision and success is a fundamental human need. Making sure your family has food, a roof over their head, a secure retirement. That's just responsible adulthood, right?
Mm-hmm.
At what point does working hard to provide for your family cross the line into what this text calls a destructive pagan imitation?
That is a great question. And the line is drawn entirely by the heart posture and the method. The text is very careful to clarify that the desire for grain and wine, the desire for a harvest, that was not the sin.
Okay, so wanting food is fine.
Right, wanting food is completely natural. The breakdown happened when they trusted their religious performance more than they trusted the ultimate provider of that food.
I see.
They cried out for material goods, but they didn't cry out with sincere dependence. The shift occurs when the pursuit of the provision completely eclipses your peace. And you start to believe that if you don't bleed for it, you won't get it. You begin to trust the hustle, the system, and your own sacrifice way more than anything else.
And this is the pivot where the ancient history becomes a very uncomfortable mirror for our modern lives.
Yeah, he is close to home.
Because we might read about ancient Israelites or modern temple mediums and think, well, I would never take a sword to my own arm to get a good harvest.
Right, we think we're so advanced.
But the source text argues that we do the exact same thing. We've just updated the weaponry.
Yeah.
We don't use literal knives anymore. We wound ourselves inwardly.
The outward slashing has been perfectly translated into inward anxiety. The physical bleeding is now restless labor, hypervigilance, and just this unchecked worldly ambition.
It's exhausting just talking about it.
It is. And if you look at the messaging of modern culture, it is essentially a synchronized chorus demanding self-reliance. Work harder, compete more fiercely, build your personal brand.
Promote yourself endlessly.
Exactly. Trust solely in your own abilities because no one else is coming to save you.
It's the ultimate gospel of the self-made individual. Our culture teaches that your own grinding effort is the only currency that matters in the universe.
Yeah.
If you want a secure life, you have to outcompete everyone around you. But the text points out the tragic irony of this mindset, right? Because people often do achieve the wealth, the status, and the recognition they are chasing.
Oh, for sure. Outwardly, they look incredibly successful. They have the corner office, the perfect LinkedIn profile, the beautiful home.
But inwardly,
The psychological and spiritual toll is just devastating. They're anxious, empty, and spiritually barren. Their calendars are completely full, but their souls are exhausted.
why does that happen, though?
Because when you lean entirely on your own strategies, your networking, your education, you are effectively choosing to carry the weight of your entire universe on your own shoulders.
Which we aren't built for.
No. The nervous system isn't designed to handle the existential weight of being your own god.
Here's where it gets really interesting. That makes me think about how we approach our careers, like the modern resume or our obsession with networking. It's essentially a sophisticated corporate rain dance.
Ah, yes, exactly.
We polish our skills obsessively. We go to every industry mixer. We send out hundreds of perfectly crafted emails. We curate our online presence until our eyes just blur.
Yeah, we do the dance.
Right. We think if I just perfect this routine, if I just do the dance flawlessly, the corporate universe will reward me with a harvest.
It's a perfect analogy
Yeah.
because it highlights the exact mechanism of the burnout. The document actually contains a brilliant, albeit unsettling metaphor about this.
What is it?
Well, when you buy into this system of total self-reliance, the very tools you use to succeed actually weaponize against you.
Wait, really?
Yeah, your talents, your drive, your achievements, your education. They become the modern swords of Hosea 7.14. They become the instruments you use to repeatedly wound yourself in your desperate pursuit of a blessing.
Man, that is such a heavy realization. Your own ambition becomes the knife. Your drive to provide for your family becomes the very thing that is cutting you to pieces inwardly. You are using your skills to try and secure a guarantee that human effort was never actually meant to provide.
Exactly.
So you end up slashing your mental health, you sacrifice your family time, you bleed out your peace of mind, all for the modern grain and new wine, early retirement, the stock options, the perceived safety.
And just like those ancient rituals, the tragic irony is that this self-harm is driven by a genuine desire for safety.
Right. We want to be safe.
We wound ourselves trying to make ourselves safe. We make ourselves physically sick trying to secure our future health. We empty our souls trying to fill our bank accounts.
It's a huge contradiction.
The text highlights this profound hypocrisy. A person might mentally acknowledge a higher power or a broader purpose, but in practice, the moment the pressure is on or a deadline looms, they revert immediately to trusting their own systems.
So true.
The theology of the head just doesn't match the anxiety of the hands.
I can hear someone out there right now, maybe sitting in traffic on their way to a massive presentation, thinking, okay, but I have a mortgage. I have real targets to hit.
Oh, absolutely.
Is this text advocating for passivity? Am I supposed to just quit my job, sit on my couch, and expect food to magically fall from the sky?
Right.
We really need to clarify this because the line between healthy work and toxic self-reliance feels very thin.
It's a vital distinction, and this raises an important question, which the source document explicitly addresses. It dives into the delicate balance between diligence and self-sufficiency,
Okay.
because work itself is not condemned. In fact, diligence, faithful labor, and wise stewardship are deeply honorable. The issue is never the physical act of working hard.
Right, so it's not a call to abandon your responsibilities or become lazy.
Not at all. The danger arises at the exact moment human effort replaces trust. It's when your heart quietly shifts and begins to believe the lie, my survival and my success depend 100% upon me.
It's that hidden arrogance.
Yeah, that hidden terror, or sometimes quiet arrogance, that you are the sole architect of your life. That is the root of the idolatry. The text provides a fascinating paradox for how we are actually supposed to operate.
Which is what?
It says believers are called to work with faithful hands while resting with trusting hearts.
Faithful hands while resting with trusting hearts. I mean, that sounds beautiful, but mechanically, how does that even work?
It's tricky.
It sounds like active labor without the underlying hum of panic. You are doing the work, you are sending the emails, you are building the spreadsheet, but you aren't carrying the existential weight of the outcome.
Yes. And to understand how it works mechanically, we really have to look at how diametrically opposed this framework is to modern culture. As we've discussed, the world praises the independent, self-sufficient hustler.
Always.
But the spiritual framework outlined here uses a classic metaphor from the gospel. Christ calling people to abide in him, like branches in a vine.
Oh, right. The vine metaphor. It's brought up a lot.
Yeah.
But if we break down the actual botany of it, it perfectly illustrates the difference between faithful hands and panicked slashing.
Yeah, how so?
Well, a branch on a grapevine doesn't strain its wood to create a grape. It doesn't sweat. It doesn't have a little independent root system trying to manufacture its own sap.
Exactly the opposite. The branch flourishes solely by remaining connected to the source of life. The sap flows naturally. The fruit is just a byproduct of the connection, not a product of the branch's isolated, frantic effort.
Right.
If the branch tried to squeeze out a grape through sheer willpower, it would just snap off and dry up.
Which means the hustle culture's ideal of the self-made individual is essentially a severed branch trying to force itself to bear fruit.
Wow, yeah.
It might look green and impressive for a brief moment, but without the continuous connection to the source, it is inevitably going to wither.
That is the exact mechanism of spiritual burnout. When self-reliance takes the wheel, your connection to the source is the first thing that gets severed.
Because you're too busy.
Exactly. The document notes that communion with God, things like quiet prayer, deep reflection, reading scripture, genuine worship, these practices are neglected. They are pushed to the margins of the calendar, or they just become empty routines.
Right, because you genuinely feel you don't have the time to simply abide when you have to produce.
The striving becomes endless, and the result is a soul that mirrors ancient Israel perfectly. Outwardly incredibly active and busy, but inwardly totally distant from the life source.
So if you're, sitting at your desk right now, staring at an overflowing inbox, how do you practically diagnose this in your own life? How can you tell if your honorable diligence has quietly morphed into slashing yourself with a sword?
The diagnostic test always lies in your internal state, your nervous system and your emotional baseline.
Okay.
Are you operating from a place of deep-seated peace or a place of underlying panic? You really have to examine your relationship with your tools. The text issues a very direct challenge. It says, lay down the tool that has become like a sword against your own soul.
That's powerful.
It asks the reader to relinquish their anxious dependence on their own understanding and their endless striving. Your gifts, your sharp mind, your education, your network, these are profound blessings.
Yeah.
But they were never designed to be your savior. They were never meant to be the ultimate source of your security. If you feel constantly wounded, chronically anxious, and spiritually barren despite all your achievements, your tools have likely become your sword.
You're using them to try and carve out a certainty that only actually comes from trust.
Yeah.
It's the difference between preparing for a crucial meeting because you care deeply about doing good work and staying up until 4 a.m. obsessively redoing the formatting on a slide because you are terrified that if it isn't perfect, your entire career will collapse.
That's a good distinction.
One is faithful hands, the other is a panicked heart wielding a sword against itself.
That's it, exactly. And the ultimate resolution the text points to isn't finding a better productivity hack.
No more life hacks.
Right. It's a return to dependence. It's a call to cease the inward slashing, to stop trying to bleed for your harvest, and instead adopt a posture of kneeling before a gracious provider whose hands hold every blessing. It requires trading the profound exhaustion of self-sufficiency for the genuine rest of reliance.
Let's bring all of this full circle. We've covered a lot of ground today. We started by looking at those jarring, visceral rituals in temple courts, people literally cutting their bodies to guarantee a good harvest.
Yeah.
And through the lens of the source document, we've seen how that ancient psychological drive for control is the exact same engine powering our modern epidemic of burnout. The fundamental human desire for security, for that grain and new wine, it really hasn't changed a bit in thousands of years.
It hasn't.
But what we've unpacked is that true flourishing never happens when we try to force the universe's hand through anxious striving. It only happens when we trade our frantic independence for humble dependence. It's so true. And, this demands a very honest, uncomfortable audit of your own life. To the listener out there, look closely at your schedule this week. Look at your ambitions and the tools you rely on most heavily. Your degree, your financial portfolio, the long hours you put in at the office. Ask yourself, are these things gifts that you are holding lightly and using faithfully? Or have they become heavy swords?
That's the real question.
Are they instruments you are using to wound your own soul, your relationships, and your mental health, all in a desperate attempt to secure a future that you ultimately cannot control?
That is the challenge to carry with you. And it brings us back to that X-ray we talked about at the very beginning of the show. If Hosea 7.14 is the clearest X-ray of the human heart we have, it shows us exactly where the fractures of burnout begin. They don't start in our overloaded calendars. They start in our desperate need for control.
Absolutely. This leaves you with one final thought to mull over, something that builds on everything we've explored today. If our modern workplaces have essentially become our new temples, and our chronic exhaustion is the modern equivalent of slashing ourselves,
Yeah.
what does that say about the modern gods of productivity? These invisible systems demand that we be spiritually empty, exhausted, and bleeding just to prove we are worthy of a paycheck or a promotion. Maybe it's time to completely redefine what a harvest looks like in your own life so you no longer feel the desperate need to bleed for it.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredibly well said.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope it gave you something powerful to think about the next time you open your laptop. Until next time.